Hello, everybody, and welcome back to The Forgotten American. My name is Melody Wright, and I do this show to talk to Americans out there that are battling inflation every day, battling the wealth inequality, and doing what they can to make America a better place. Meanwhile, they're being forgotten. They're working hard, they're paying their taxes, they're doing what they're supposed to do, yet they still can't afford the American dream, a home. And a lot of things seem out of reach that were in reach for prior generations. So I have the absolute pleasure today to do this series with one of my best friends, Travis Spencer, who found me on the side of the road, just kind of the side of the YouTube road, I think,
Hmm.
and picked me up, and we went traveling together. And I heard his story on that trip. I don't. How many hours were we in the car, Travis?
Ah, we're in the car a lot of hours, Melody. A
So
lot of
I got
hours.
to hear his story, and I got to know a Travis that I think a lot of people don't know. And I think his story is so amazing for what it encapsulates around the American experience, the ups and downs, the boom and bust, and just love his story of how he actually got to be where he is. So without further ado, first thing that you guys know I like to do is turn it over to the guests to just give an introduction. Tell us about who you are, Travis, right now, and then I'll ask a couple of questions about how you got here.
Well, I appreciate you, Melody. My story's pretty simple. I mean, I just lost everything. That's the American story, right? And then getting it back. But who I am right now is basically a full-time content creator, journalist. That's, an inspired journalist. I'm still trying to get confident enough to say that. I've been doing YouTube, but I'm also a licensed professional in real estate and a licensed educator also in real estate. I've been a licensed loan officer, residential mortgage loan officer, probably for, I think, going on 23 years now. My passion's in that field, Melody, because I love the numbers. I'm also a realtor, though. I've been licensed, I believe, now for about 12 years as a realtor. I mainly have my realtor license. I mean, yeah, you can make some money on the side, but I mainly have my realtor license for me so that I don't need a realtor to purchase things or a house, and I can use my commission to help with the down payment. But I also have my realtor's license as well so that I can access MLS, multiple listing service, and I can analyze data on a localized level to really understand what's going on in the market. And so, fast forward to today, one of my goals is with my channel is to provide the truth. I've been bullish on real estate for my entire life. It's only been the last probably about 2.5 years where I've got, you know, started sounding the alarm on people needing to pump the brakes, people needing to understand what's really going on behind the scenes. And my mission now is just to give back to society. And what's interesting, Melody, is I never intended for this to happen. I never, 3 years ago, if you would have said I'd have been a full-time content creator on YouTube, I would have laughed in your face. Like,
Mhm.
YouTube is for people that play video games and want to learn how to install a carpet in their house. I had no idea 3 years ago the impact that making video on YouTube could have on my local people in my local market, but also around the nation. And it's been very humbling, and I feel
An
very blessed
incredible
to.
journey. Yeah. And
Yes.
and so we're gonna get to some of the incredible journalism and also, what you're doing from an education perspective at the end of the show. But I wanna talk a little bit about, your childhood because I think, our childhood shapes us, and what we can see for some of these younger generations, we kind of Gen X kind of went to the other side, became helicopter parents because of the way we grew up, and we're kind of seeing how that's impacted them and made it harder for them in real life. And so my story was really rough, and I think that's what shaped me into the person I am, the strong person that I am, who can really do difficult things. Like you and I were in the car for, was it 7 days? I can't even remember, thousands of miles driving in all kinds of conditions. Not everybody can do that. Not everybody would even think to even get in the car and do that. And of course, you wrestle sharks, and we'll talk about that later too. But let's start with growing up in California. Tell me a little bit about what your childhood was like.
I guess my childhood was probably like any other childhood. I grew up, I would say my early childhood in Chino, California. It was a little bit rough. I got jumped by gangs. My mom had to get me out of there because I would come home bloodied and beaten. So I know a little bit about racism. It's very scary. You feel very helpless. But ultimately, my father pushed me to excel. My father was not, I don't want to say an absent father at all, because he was very loving. We used to go on vacations all the time, but he was a workaholic. He still is to this day. He's a workaholic Monday through Sunday, all hours of the day he is working. So my father had conditioned me to be great. My father had conditioned me to be the best, right? If you're not, don't have a college education, because he's not college educated, but he is a very successful outwork people. So he taught me good work ethic, yes, sir, no, sir, respect people, and, shine. And so when I lost everything, it hurt even more, because I was raised to shine and I was raised to succeed. Now, as far as my mother, oh man, and I lost my mother when she was 42, found out she has a genetic condition called Lynch syndrome, which I also have. It's a colorectal highly metastasizing genetic disorder for cancer. So I have the same thing. So that sucks. But as far, my mom taught me how to love, Melody. My mom taught me how to live and to love people and to not talk trash ever. My mom never talked trash on anyone. And I was like, Mom, what about this person? How could you say
Mhm.
they're not a scumbag, right? Or how could you say they're not a clown? So my mom always taught me to love and to live life serving people, to live life loving people. She actually, converted to being Jewish. I'm Christian. So I got that whole taste of the Jewish society, how loving they are, how disciplined they are to walking the word of God, the Old Testament, and what happened, at 18, I moved out of my house. I became a loan officer in real estate. My father was in real estate as well, manufactured housing. I mean, he's a king when it comes to manufactured housing. So I got started in real estate at 18. I was licensed. Now, at the time, you didn't need a license to be a loan officer, but you did need a license to be a loan officer that quoted interest rates and talked about fees. So I was like, all right, well, I want to be the best, right? That's what my father taught me. So I got my license, which also allowed me to be a licensed agent. So I was actually a licensed realtor and a licensed loan officer in the state of California 10 days after I turned 19. My goal was to be licensed before I was 18. Again, my father just pushed me my whole life. Succeed, work, work, and then you'll get ahead. So,
So
yeah, I
Travis,
started.
just I
Yeah,
just
sorry.
want to no. I just want to, pointing to the sign behind you, hustle. I mean, I think that is where a lot of that came from, right? That
It is.
drive to be better. And just quickly before we move on from your childhood, just a little bit. I know you have a son. How different do you think it is for him than the way you grew up?
Oh, it's not even comparable. When I was a senior in high school, I was already planning out my career in real estate. He's a senior in high school, and we're trying to figure out, does he want to get school loans?
Mhm.
And it's a divided family. He lives with his mother, but it's hard to be able to talk to my son and his mom and say, hey guys, college may not be the right thing to do. Going to
Mhm.
college may actually put you behind. Like, oh,
Mhm.
what do you mean? I was raised a certain way, go to college, get ahead. But actually, what we're finding is when you leave college, if you even leave college, you actually start behind. You
That's
start an
right.
overwhelming debt. And so, um, it's not even comparable. I mean, he can't even think about buying a house. When I came out of high school, right out of high school, they had just loosened lending standards. So when I graduate high school, it's like, oh, you can get a house right now. You don't even have to make income because you could state it, or you don't even have to prove it by doing a NINA, no income, no asset loan. So I went out of high school with open arms into the housing market. I came out of high school with open arms into mortgages, because also when I got out of high school, that's when they started lowering interest rates. So they
Mhm.
started lowering interest rates. Boom, the business blew up. So
What year was that you graduated?
2002,
Yes, yes. So you graduated right into it. Yeah.
right into it. And I graduated early as well. And because I was always trying to get ahead. I was always trying to succeed. And, but I would just say normal childhood, father who's kind of macho. We're hunting all the time. We did not do normal California stuff. We hunted, fished. We're always outdoors. So he's a rugged dude, really not good at talking about his feelings. My father's absolutely horrible. He'll never learn a computer, right? But he is a
Yeah.
workaholic, bad to the bone, dude. My mom, just the perfect mom, that you would want as a little boy, someone that just loves you and just builds you up and is always there for you. Man, I miss her, but that was my childhood.
Yeah. Okay, I'll let you go forward now.
No,
19 years
but
old.
yeah, no, I mean, yeah, I was just turned 19, got right into mortgages, and I didn't know what I didn't know. But when I was exposed to the mortgage industry, I mean, it was, well, first of all, I was a young kid. So the first thing is when I'm going into a broker shop, if I'm getting a job or at that time, I learned that actually I was the asset, right? I had all this energy and all this skill and all this desire. So I would size up all the sales agents, right? That's the type of kid I was. I'd go in, I'm like, I could beat all these people. I could be better than all of them because that was my
I love
mindset,
it.
and so that was great for the first couple of years, but I started noticing things really get out of hand probably towards the end of 2006,
Mm.
when someone came into my broker shop with my broker's permission to offer fraudulent
Mm.
bank statements, fraudulent paycheck stubs. And I'm thinking to myself, number one, how the heck did this person get permission to sell fraud it was $500? So they're selling bank statements and paycheck stubs for $500, Melody. But I also remember thinking, like, why would you commit fraud when the system has already allowed you to do no income or stated
Right.
income? So now you also, like, you know what I mean? It
Yeah.
got so bad that, you know, people were just trying to squeeze blood out of a rock or juice out of a rock. And it was, that was the moment where I was like, this is bad. And I remember just taking a step back thinking, like, this can't go on. This is
Mhm.
very corrupt. This is very immoral, but still kept my head in the sand, right? It flashed in my head. I was like, my gosh, I'll never forget that moment. But I still trended back into keeping my own head in my sand and living the rat race because I was sold a lifestyle where I had to have a nice car, nice house, and I had to keep spending, and I had to go to the malls to have the most recent Kenneth Cole. Remember Kenneth Cole? Had all their gear,
Yes.
man. All their
Yeah.
gear. You know what that did for me? Absolutely nothing. All
Right.
the clothes is lost. I have no idea where it's at. Right.
Right.
So, I just spent to the end. And essentially what happened is I'm just hustling. I'm hustling. 2008 comes by. Finally the housing market, starts crashing. I start seeing lenders on every street that I used to work with, because back in the day, there was, my gosh, there were so many non-banks. Non-banks were on every single corner, and those non-banks would go to broker shops like I was in and solicit us. There was like 30 people that wanted my business. And so it was
Mhm.
crazy, Melody, because when it started going downhill, I mean, every single corner had a non-bank closing down, like in multiple shopping centers. And so, like, I remember driving to work one day, and there was like 12 companies that were going out of business. I would call to get pricing. Pricing is like an interest rate. Like, all right, I have a
Mhm.
customer, they want to buy a house. Here's their credit score. Here's your down payment. What's the interest rate? So I'd call, boom, out of service, out of service. Oh, we no longer, so I watched it happen rapidly, but still, I still did not learn. Right. I was like, it's okay. The Fed's got me. I'm just going to work hard and it'll be okay. Cause that's what I was taught. Just work hard and it'll be okay.
Yes.
But it wasn't until I lost my own income, like I got no more phone calls, and I had a high-end operation to where I was doing bulk mailing. So I was spending $10,000 a month, age of 22. I was spending $10,000 a month doing bulk mailing. So, I had just spent, I think I spent about 6 grand on a bulk mail, and I got like one phone call. And it was at
Wow.
that point where
Mm.
I knew I was dead in the water, because in addition to that expense, my overhead was $20,000. Like, I'm looking back, I'm like, why was my overhead $20,000? I could do the same thing I'm doing from my home office back then. So I was just drowning in this overhead. And again, it didn't hit me until I couldn't pay the overhead anymore. Like, I literally
Mhm.
could not pay it anymore. So, I
And
remember on my
back then,
way.
Travis,
Yeah,
were you doing what you do today, like reading news articles and trying to understand the Fed and understand all
no,
of this?
not at all. Not at all. What I was doing was hanging out with friends, partying, going out to eat, wearing my gold watches, drinking Don Perignon, and having fun.
Yeah. What kind of car did you have?
Oh my gosh. Well, I had a BMW 3 Series, but my last car was a Cadillac CTS-V manual transmission. So it was a manual 6-speed. My gosh, it had a Corvette engine.
Wow.
That car was pretty beast car. A volunteer repo, though. It turned into a volunteer repo. I
Volunteer
say
repo.
volunteer because they could not find me. I was out in the desert doing 360s out in the desert in Pahrump with that sports car before I gave it back. My dad was so annoyed with me. He's like, "Just give it back. Stop ruining it." I'm like, "I can't. I'm gonna ruin it if I want. I got 20,000 wrapped up into it." But
Do you
stupid.
think that if someone had stopped you back then, Travis, and said, "Hey, maybe you need to go check out this real estate mindset dude. He's saying some really interesting things." Would you have taken a listen?
Maybe, maybe it's hard to say, Melody. I lean towards no. I lean towards no because I was so stuck in the rat race. I was so worried about making enough money so that I can go out to eat with my friends tomorrow that I didn't stop to say, let me investigate this, let me empower myself, let me really figure out what's going on because I was convinced that the way that I was living my life was the right way.
Mhm. When was the moment, like, tell us about the moment when you kinda sat down and said, "It's over. It's just over."
It was that bulk mail. So when I had spent 6, 7 grand on that bulk
Yeah.
mail, I'm on my way to my office. I get one phone call and I'm sitting in my office and I'm looking around. No one's in the office. My overhead's 25,000. I just spent the 6 grand. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I have no money. I have $150,000 in credit card debt. How am I going to pay my bills? So it was that day and my drive. So I left the office depressed, right? It was that day on the way home when I finally realized it was over. But by that time, Melody, I was broke. I had no income and I was drowning in debt. And I remember on the way home, I called my dad. I'm like, Dad, I need to borrow 12 grand. Right. But and this time my father didn't know I was having these issues. So at that time I was paying him back if I ever borrowed any money. So he gave me 12 grand. I spent that 12 grand to pay off my bills for another 3 weeks. And then boom, had to move in with my sister. And my dad,
Wow.
I'll never forget my dad saying this. He's like, one of my biggest regrets is giving you that money. He's like, I
Mm.
should never have given you that money because it was already too late. And that's what I
Mhm.
see going on right now. There's a lot of people, it's already too late. But the thing is yes, it's already too late, but you can minimize the damage. I
Right.
went all out, Melody. I mean, I spent to the end. I was going into the mall. There was a point, and this was the other thing. So it was like those people coming into my office selling bank statements and paycheck stubs. So that hit me. It was on the way home. That hit me, right? But also another time before I had lost everything, and this was after those people came in my office selling fraud. I was in the mall and I walked into the mall and I started getting anxiety immediately. And I'm like, what the heck? Like, why do I have this anxiety? Like, I had the shakes, Millie. I was
Mhm.
shakes. Like, this is the addiction. And I remember thinking, like, why do I have anxiety? And it was because I needed to buy something. Do you? And it was that scared the crap out of me. And so I bought some stuff. Like, I bought like 2 grand worth of pinnacle clothes, right?
Mhm.
But I remember thinking like, so I knew I had an issue, right? It scares me, but I still bought stuff. But I knew at that point, I'm like, man, the way I'm living my life, this is not something that's sustainable, and this is not making me happy. This is just giving me anxiety. But I still did it.
Yeah.
So those were just bits and pieces of me starting to become more awake and more awake and more awake. But it wasn't until I lost all my money and couldn't pay any of my bills that it finally clicked. But by that time, it was too late for me.
And tell us a little bit about how you dug yourself out of that hole,
Oh my God.
because you made a lot of life changes. Yeah.
So the thing is when you lose everything, it's even harder to get back up because the system is designed in a way to where if you do lose, if you have low credit, if you don't have any money, you're charged more money. It's like you get a higher interest rate. So when you fall on the bottom, like I fell to the bottom, dude, the system keeps you down, Melody. It keeps you
Mhm.
down. And to be realistic, that's part of the reason why it took me 9 years. It took me 9 years to rebound. So at first is like I'm in depression. I'm like, "Oh my God, what am I gonna do? I'm a complete failure. This is not how I was raised." So I gotta go through that, right? So that's probably a year, 2 years of that. And then you make a decision, "Okay, I'm tired of this crap. Maybe I found a job finally. I'm ready to repair my situation." So I get secure credit cards, understanding I have to reestablish my credit. And I have every intention to stop the bad from happening, stop any collections, right? Like I'm on my feet enough now to where I can start making progress. Because remember, I went bankrupt, so I still creditors coming after me, IRS was coming after me, super depressing. So when I decided to fix myself, I got credit cards and to reestablish secure credit cards because I can't get any credit cards at this point. I go into Bank of America, they're going to call the cops on me, right? They're like,
Right.
you just went bankrupt on us. Like, get out of here, creep.
Yeah.
Kick rocks, right? So I had to get a secure credit card, which is something to where I have to put my own money down as collateral for them to give me a credit card so I can start reestablishing. The problem is, that's great. And I never lost hope, but life kept happening. And so the first round when I was trying to better myself, life started happening and I got buried in emergency expenses. And
Mm.
as a result of that, I pulled from those credit cards. Those credit cards, I went late, destroyed my credit again. And so that's the other side of the coin. When you're ready to reestablish your credit, get secure credit cards, go down an action plan, you have to not only maintain hope, you have to be blessed enough not to get tackled by life. So, anyways, the first thing tackles me, my credit goes down again. Finally, get to Texas, right? Reestablish my entire career here in Texas. Reestablish my entire credit here in Texas. Find my wife, get married
Yeah,
to my
let's not
best
skip
friend.
though the
Okay,
hard
sorry.
work. Like, so tell us a little bit about the manual labor you did, because
Mm,
I think to kind of like, yeah, 9 years, da da da. But I mean, you like you said, and you kind of went to the bottom, and you had a real awakening, and that kind of happened, I think, through doing some of that hard work and really reflecting. So just tell us a little
true.
bit about that time of just manual labor
All
in your
right.
life.
I was hoping we can skip that, but that's all right.
I
So when I
know.
first got to Texas, when I first get to Texas, I'm broken. Right? I'm broken, but that's good. Like, I'm broken because I hit rock bottom, so now it's only ways up. And I had a spiritual awakening. I don't have to go into that, but I feel like the Holy Spirit, just came over me and was like, Travis, you can decide to win or you can decide to live or die. Decide right now. And I was like, I'm gonna decide to live. And I swear, Melody, it's like all the emotions and depression and anxiety in my head gone right away. And it's like I
Absolutely.
understood what I needed to do immediately. It was so amazing. And so I
You
went to
just gave
Texas.
me chills. So,
Yeah, and I knew what to
yeah.
do, and I went to Texas, and for the almost 2 years, almost 2 years in Texas, it was like a year and a half to 2 years in Texas, I got completely out of real estate. I was like, I was burnt out in every faucet because I went into loan mods, right? I saw the catastrophe with loan modifications, debt settlement. Like, I try to utilize the skills that I had made during real estate into
Mhm.
other fields, and I was like, I can't do this. Like, I can't tell
Right.
people to stop paying their mortgage unless I know 100% that by them stop paying their mortgage, they're going to get this mod. And you didn't know that, and I couldn't sell it. So, anyways, I get into come to Texas, and I start working for my brother-in-law, hanging rain gutters and doing siding in Houston in the middle of summer. Melody. In the
Mhm.
middle of summer in Houston, it was like working in hell. It was so hot and it was so humid, but it was so good for me. It was so good
Mhm.
for me because I had a grin and bear it, man. And I was a lion. I felt like a lion at that time. I'm like, I can do this. I could do this. And it was funny because I became my brother-in-law's best worker he's ever had. The nickname they gave me in construction was Momentum because I never stopped. And because I was always thinking, like, I'm doing this for my son. I'm doing this for my son, right? I'm doing this to get ahead. I came to Texas. My license was suspended. That's
Mm.
how bad I was. I was in the ditches. I never going to get back there, and that's why I have so much compassion and empathy for
Mhm.
people because I wanted to get out. I didn't want to stay in the gutter. And I was willing to work hard. I made sacrifices. I bettered my life, and it still was taken from me. And honestly, I hate to say it, but that's the type of lesson that some people need to learn. The only way that some people can learn is through pain. That's the premise behind spankings. The pain learned, you
Mm.
learn from the pain. So, I got here for and this is so crazy. This story's funny. 2 years, right? And I'm just crushing it at these hanging rain gutters. I'm on the roofs, right? I'm like, yeah, I'm doing this. I'm really doing it. This is cool. And then, they start making me sell, right? So I start doing quotes. I'm crushing the quotes as well. And then, I have a meeting with my sister. I'm like, hey, I want to get paid more. I'm going to blow up your business, right? And I'm talking to my sister, this whole plan I come up with, and she looks at me and she just like smirks. She's like, Travis, you're fired. right? In so many, she didn't say that necessarily, right? But
Right.
and I was like, what the hell? What are you talking about? I'm the best you've ever had. I was like,
Mhm.
"Dude, you can't fire me. You've never had anyone better before." And she's like, "Travis, I love you too much." She's like, "You don't belong here." She's like, "You belong back in real estate. We need to go be riding on Sea-Doos, drinking Cristal champagne again." And she's like, "That's who you are." She's like, "That's your talent." And at the time, I was so offended, Melody, because I had worked so hard on this presentation for my sister. I'm like, "What the hell are you talking about?" But anyway, she tells me that. Um, 24 hours later, I have a job at AmCap Home Loans. 24 hours later. So after she says that, I send my resume out, and again, I'm hired in 24 hours. And then, I had I think maybe about a 6 or 8, maybe like an 8-year career at AmCap, and they're no longer in business. But ever since then, 8-year career, just got back in, became a leader in the industry again.
And
But
and,
yeah, construction. I was in construction with sludge in my hands, getting cut from all of the, from the rain gutters. You had to cut those rain gutters. All that metal would be popped out. But I'll tell you, man, I mean, some of that's the most honest, rewarding work ever.
it's something I think that we've lost, connection with, and, I personally have had to do a lot of manual labor in my life as well, not to that extent, but, waiting tables, working in grocery stores, picking blueberries. I did that when I was 12
Yeah.
years old, whatever. I mean, I had, like, 3 to 5 jobs in college, but there's just something about hard work that is such a cleanse for the soul,
Mhm.
and because I your body keeps so much of your emotion in, believe it or not. I mean, you can there's a great book called Body Keeps a Score, and it's all about how your body remembers trauma, remembers things. And I think, you have to kind of work that out of your system. And I think sometimes manual labor is a great way to get your focus off yourself, because you are doing things, making things, building things, and not
Yep.
thinking so much about yourself, and your ego really gets
Yeah.
pushed to the side, and you can kind of start really growing because your ego has to shut up because you're just so flippin' tired.
It's
Like,
that
so
it's I mean, that was one of my survival mechanisms for the depression, to combat depression for back in the day. The only way that I knew how to combat depression and anxiety in the sense of failing other than praying, right? That was my relationship with God got better as I was better to myself. But, at first, the only thing that I knew to conquer that melody was not thinking about myself. Like, the only
Mhm.
way to get out of my own head was by helping other people. So I would help other people as much as I can. I actually became it's crazy as to sound, a youth minister for I think almost 3 years.
Yeah.
I became a youth minister because I was like, man, look at all these things that I learned. It starts when you're a child, and so part of my youth ministry, I would because it was young men, like young kids, to second and third grade, was just praying. I wanted to teach them what
Mhm.
prayer was, not to be embarrassed about praying. And so by the time I would be done at the end of the year on my classes, each of those young kids would pray for each other confidently, right?
That's
I-
amazing.
So yeah, serving others, I think, is an important part of life. If you're not serving others, I think you're really missing out
Yeah,
on
I
on the
I
good things in life.
I totally agree with that. And I think that, that is one way to find joy when there is no joy to be found. It's by bringing joy to someone else. And that will give you, I mean, it's a positive feedback loop. But if you don't mind, why don't you tell us about meeting that amazing wife of yours, and just tell us that love story, Travis?
Well, you know, so when first of all, so I met my wife after 6 months of dating, but I don't wanna get into too much here, but, um, essentially, I had decided I wanted to be married, right? I wanted to be
Mhm.
married, I wanted a partner in life, and so I started dating, I don't remember when, maybe 2014? I'm not sure. I think 2014, maybe 2013. I started dating for marriage, right? And I had to go, I think, on 21 dates, and a whole bunch of women were like freaked out. Oh my god, I hated dating. It's so awful, and it's expensive as well, because I had paid for everything. I was like, man, I can't do.
Right.
So I would have to do like 4 dates a weekend because I still had my son. So when he would go with his mom, I'd be like, all right, lunch, dinner, lunch, dinner. I got to get this out of the way. And so, again, I was dating for marriage, and so I would tell the women that I was on the dates with, like, specifically, "I am here because I'm looking for my wife." And so when I finally met my wife, she was the only and it was like 21 dates, and, I finally met her, but she was the only person that only woman that she commanded that I prayed for the food. I was already praying over the meals. It's just my religion. I was already praying over the food for these other dates, but she was the only person that commanded that I pray uh, for the meal that we're having. And then we started talking openly about marriage. This is our first date, right? And so she's the one's talking about me in marriage. I'm like, well, this is a great difference.
Mhm.
And it was great conversation. We talked about God. We talked about our goals. And then that first date, I told her about my past, within
Mm.
reason. I was like, "Listen, I'm a failure."
Within reason.
Within reason, I was like, "Listen, I'm a failure." And I said these things, and I told her about my failures because I didn't want anyone to use that against us, right? I didn't want anyone to use that over my head because, people that are jealous or hateful will try to use your past failures to create a division in between your
Mhm.
relationships. And
Mhm.
so, again, my first date, like, "Hey, I fell. Here's some of the things that happen. Here's my journey. Are you afraid?" And she's like, "I love you. I respect you even more." And
Yes.
so, long story short, it was actually a short story. I asked her to marry me a month and a half later.
Wow.
My God, when I asked her dad, I'm like, "There's no way I can ask this guy. Like, he's gonna look at me and laugh. Like, how could I ask this guy after a month and a half to marry his daughter? He's gonna look at me like, how do you begin to even know my daughter? You're gonna." So
Mhm.
it's so funny. There's only 2 times in my life that I remember losing, uh, my voice, right? Like, I can't talk. I lost my words. That was one of them. I was like,
Wow.
Sir, like, I couldn't even talk because I was like, in my head, I'm like, he's gonna slam me." But anyways, I asked him, he gave permission, and we were married within 3 months of meeting each other, and we have a great life. We have a spiritual life as well, and,
3
my best friend.
beautiful children.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I mean,
And
beautiful.
what I love about my wife, Melody, is we're still, and I'm not pushing my religion, I'm just explaining my life. We're scriptural. So she understands, this is interesting, her role in our household, and I understand my role in the household. And so we never have this tug of war of power. Do you understand what I
Mhm.
mean? Like,
Yeah, I
I'm a
do.
man, you're a woman. We don't.
Yeah,
We understand our duties, right?
right,
And it's a biblical understanding.
right.
And um, it's without that, there's no way that I could have got to where I'm at today. Without that type of support and that type of, um, you know, it's just support, that type of lifestyle. I couldn't have made it this far. And honestly, I'm a wacko. I mean, I'm not. We don't have a perfect marriage, but certainly our foundation is as close to perfect as possible.
And that foundation is just so important. When you talk to couples that make it for a long time, it's that foundation because I think, we're human and we can be really annoying and we get sick of things really fast, like and especially things that we think we want. We seem to get sick of those the fastest, if you know what I mean. And but that foundation can ground you when
Yes.
they're just seasons, right? They're just seasons of time when things just aren't going exactly how you want it to be, or and it kind of keeps you there for the long haul. And so I think that's really important. That might be something else for other people. For you and Shara, it's your faith, and so I really admire your relationship, and I'm a huge fan of her, your kids, and the lasagna. So
Oh yeah, that lasagna is out of control. Lasagna
it
is out of
really is.
control.
Okay, so you're kind of back on your feet again. COVID boom happens. I think those of us in the market were probably the most surprised. I don't know about you. At least I was. I remember overnight our volumes tripling, doubling. But tell us about that time and what you were doing.
Um, well, I remember exactly what I was doing in my career. I mean, I was still full time, right? So at that time, I was still full time loan officer and a CE instructor. So I was doing loans and I was also instructing realtors. And so in 2019, the industry was going down.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't remember that. The Fed was doing quantitative tightening. They were selling mortgage-backed securities. They had raised the federal funds rate, So the real estate industry was
Tanking.
declining in 2019.
Yep.
I had kind of had an emergency meeting. Seriously, like this is crazy. I had an emergency meeting with my wife because prior to that, I was a branch manager over 3 branches. So I was managing 3 operations, and I walked away from it because I was just sick of it. So that topped with the industry going down led to this emergency household meeting, meaning like, hey, 2019 on, real estate's it's probably not going to make that much money. We have to completely rebudget. So we completely rebudgeted. And then the opposite thing happens. The industry blows up because of COVID. And so everything's great, right? Like I'm still doing my classes, I'm still doing loans, but as a loan officer, I mean, refinances. Holy, I didn't even really post COVID. I didn't even do too many purchase loans
Yeah.
for a couple of reasons. One, because I was there's some great realtors. Okay. There are some great realtors, but most of them are not great.
Hmm.
And you get burnt out. And I say that very nicely. I could say it very differently. So I got burnt out
Well,
and
it's the
I was,
lesson from your mom, right? There's no need to
that's right.
trash talk. Yeah.
That's right. And it's very hard because the lessons from my dad say say
The
otherwise.
opposite. Yeah.
So, you know, it blows up, business blows up, rates go down, mortgage-backed securities are being purchased again from the Fed, which drives rates down even further. Rates wouldn't have gone down to 2 and 3% without the Fed
Right.
purchasing. It wasn't just the federal funds rate. So refinances blow up. Okay, that's all great. I have to move now at this point. I won't go into that story. I don't want to go into that story, but I'm essentially forced to move. And then I go out. I'm like, man, I can't, I'm not going to buy any of these houses. Here's one good deal right here, but boom, it's gone in 24 hours. Here's a good deal right here. Oh, it's gone in 24 hours. So the only way during 2021, because that's when I became a renter at the end of 2021, the only way that I could have purchased a house in 2021 is by sacrificing my morals and
Mhm.
settling on something, because in order to get a house, I had to go through bidding wars. I couldn't do any contingencies. I couldn't do any inspections. And I wasn't willing to do that. When I purchased real estate, and I've taught this my whole life, I have the seller pay for my closing costs. I have the seller pay for my closing costs because as a buyer, I don't want to overextend purchasing a home. And they're the ones that are getting the proceeds anyways. And then back then, it was really easy just to raise the purchase price and to have the closing costs included in the purchase price. I go that a different time. But anyways, I couldn't find any houses that I was willing to sacrifice all these things. So I start renting. 2022 comes. I pretty much get out of the business almost entirely in 2023. I'm still doing the courses in 2022. I'm still doing a little bit of loans, but I essentially turn my back to all purchases. I
Mhm.
turn my back to all purchases because I lost everything. I could not continue to help because I didn't see it as help, right? I couldn't continue to act like I was helping people when in reality, I had every red flag going off in my body. Emotion, aggression, shame, fear, go buy, go buy. And then the prices are going parabolic the whole time. I'm like, oh my
Mhm.
gosh, like we could have been okay in 2022 if those prices would have continued to normalize. And when I say
Right.
normalize, what I'm saying is match income growth,
Right.
because that's what we need to sustain the prices. So, um, come 2023, I completely get out of get out, actually 2022. I've got out of the business completely. Since getting out of the business, I've helped one person off of YouTube. And I've turned my back since then because these people that I helped were special in that, I beat them up. They convinced me they convinced me for me to
Yeah.
take them on as my customers. I'm like, well, I'm not going to do that. I'm like, because I
Mhm.
don't think you should buy right now. And I'm like, why do you think you should buy? And so we just kept going back and forth. And long story short, every situation is different. They had a lot of money to save. They weren't overextended. They're making plenty of money, low debt to income ratio, like the perfect people, right? And I'm like, well, do you guys understand you may be trapped in for 10 years? They're like, yeah. I'm
Mhm.
like, okay, well, what does that mean to you? Right? You know what I mean? Like I'm
Yeah.
like, okay, well, what does that mean? Like I'm not just giving these short, lazy answers. Well, if you can afford it, buy a house. Well, what does that mean? What do
Mhm.
you mean, can you afford a house? Okay, because
Right.
every agent says that, but they never explain what it means to afford a house because they themselves do not know, Melody.
Right.
Realtors do not understand what affordability means. They just think it's interest rates. They
Right.
literally
And
80% of the
payment.
realtors,
Payment
that's
and
it.
yeah, it's it.
That's
Yeah.
those things matter, but that's not what's going on behind the scenes right now. In fact, we're in this situation because the rates were and the payments were too low. The rates and payments were too low, and so that drove prices up at a pace that was way, way out of whack with, again, the income. And how do people think that income would keep up with prices when the Federal Reserve is doing quantitative tightening? In other words, they want us to be fired. The Federal Reserve does not want us making more money right now. So
Right.
you mean to tell me that in an environment where I'm not supposed to make any more money, I'm somehow going to start making a whole bunch more money so that prices sustain? What's happening right now is nothing like the 70s and 80s, except for that prices are out of whack with homes. What's happening right now is way different than the 70s and 80s because the consumers have been robbed for the last 40 years. The wage gap is way worse than the 70s and 80s. We can see that with the savings rate. We can see that with the wage growth. That's the biggest thing. Go back to the 70s and 80s. Look at every year for 15 years from 1970 to 1985 and look at the wage growth and look at the savings rate, the ability for people to save, and then match that with today's stats. It's nowhere near. And then we got the PE ratio as well, the price to earning ratio. The price to earning ratio back in the 70s and 80s was 3 to 4 times, which
Mm.
means 3 to 4 times your salary to pay off your house. Right now, it's almost 8.
Right.
So there are similarities. Okay. I think what's happening is the bulls and the Fed wants things to go down like the 70s and 80s because that means prices will sustain. But another thing that's different than the 70s and 80s is the Federal Reserve's and Wall Street manipulation. It's
Mhm.
it's it's nowhere near the level of Keynesian economics like in the 70s and 80s. In my opinion, we still got to pay for 2012 Operation Twist, which
Mhm.
people don't even realize. There was a whole wealth gap crisis that happened in 2012 right underneath everyone's nose. It was called Operation Twist, and the Federal Reserve started purchasing mortgage-backed securities like crazy again, which spurred Wall Street
To
coming into
buy
our
those.
housing market.
Yes.
That was the Federal Reserve that did that.
Right. Right.
The Federal Reserve brought Wall Street in, and it just exploded since 2012. And so all of this demand has been pulled forward, all of this demand. And Wall Street, with the help of the Federal Reserve and at the hand of the Federal Reserve, I mean, the housing market right now, I mean, it's worse than
Partnering with
worse than
Fannie and Freddie and our government, absolutely. And I
Yep,
was
that's
there
another thing.
watching those sales. So, one other thing people forget about the 70s is that the women were rejoining the work or not rejoining, I'm sorry, joining the workforce. I that's part of my story. My mom had to go to work. That's one of the things that really tore their marriage apart because, she when they got married, the whole idea was she would be able to stay home, be a stay-at-home mom, take care of the house, take care of the kids and the
Yeah,
home because that is it's a business. I mean, the home is a business. You have to run it like
100%.
a business. You have to get operational efficiencies. You've got to look at your expenses and so, that was what she wanted to do, but that wasn't enough. Like, and so she had to go to work and she became our school secretary, but that's not what she wanted. And it really drove my parents apart. And we ended up losing our home to foreclosure anyway. And so I think people miss the fact that we had, that's when two incomes really started, kind
Yeah,
of going out there in that purchasing power. And so I think people really misunderstand where we are today and for all of the reasons that you just said. And you did such a great job of it. So, okay, so you're kind of out of real estate and then, how do you get on YouTube? Like what and maybe this is the time to talk
yeah,
about your little side
yeah,
hobby.
yeah. I mean, it was completely by chance. Again, I mean, I always looked at YouTube as just where children go to learn how to
Right.
play video games. What got me on YouTube is land-based shark fishing. And land-based shark fishing is catching sharks by land and like almost everyone, right? I mean, there's a small amount of people that don't do this, but not only catching them, but also measuring, tagging, collecting DNA, and releasing them. And then giving that data back to some scientific institution, whether it's NOAA, it could be Texas A&M, could be the Texas Shark Fishing Radio. I mean, there's several. colleges specifically and programs that are using migration data from tagging from anglers. So they call it civil scientists. But anyways, I just started doing videos because I just wanted to. I always loved cinema, Melody. And, I always loved
Yeah.
cinema, and I was like, yeah, I wonder if I could do this, because I always thought like we had some super epic times catching these sharks. I mean, the things that we've seen great whites. Oh my gosh. I mean, I've seen this more than once too. I mean, the most amazing thing, I've seen a great white shark, probably 11 foot, jumping at this middle of the night in California, a great white shark. We hooked it, jumping out of the water like a marlin with a full
Wow.
moon in the background. So you could see this giant great white shark
Wow.
jumping like a
Wow.
marlin. So anyways, people hate me for doing that, but I'm not killing them. So anyways, I start doing videos there. I'm like, wow, this is pretty cool, right? Like, oh, you do a scene and then B-roll. Oh, and there's audio and there's video and there's light and there's all this stuff. And then I was like, wow, editing is pretty amazing. And just, and then I just started getting infatuated with editing. Not even not even YouTube at this point. It was the editing. I mean, I got lost in the editing. I love the editing, Melody, because it gives you the ability to tell a story, and you
Mhm.
don't have to rely on anyone else to tell that story. So I was like, I'm going to start with editing. And then I just, I put my heart and soul into some of these shark fishing videos. Oh my gosh. I mean, some scenes, like a 10-second scene, would take me 3 hours to
Wow.
record. I mean, I loved it. I pushed myself to the max. I was doing crazy cinematography, transitioning from a drone to a GoPro under a moving vehicle. So, I just got there, and then, because I was also training realtors, and I'm like, you know what? I wonder what it looks like on YouTube in real estate. So I just started researching, what was going on in real estate. And it's funny, at that time, it was before all of this craziness. And at that time, it was like the top 10 pros and cons of Houston, right?
Mhm.
Or, and things, or if you're going to California, moving to Houston, what that's like. And so it's so funny. And so I started making those videos, not many, because I was helping realtors. So I didn't want to interfere with what realtors were doing. And so I was training realtors how to do YouTube videos before I was doing them myself.
Right. Right.
And and then I was getting frustrated because no one was listening to me. I was telling these realtors like, hey, this is a great opportunity you have to speak value into your community. I'm like, you guys really have an opportunity to show people. And I was always about using the math. I was a teacher that was like, stop your cheerleading. It makes me sick, right? Use the math and really show these people how this works, right? Get under the hood. So anyways, they're not listening. And I end up catching COVID at the end of 2021, and it puts me in the hospital. I have a fever for 2.5 weeks. I'm having mad hallucinations at the time, fevers. I'm sick for 3 months. At the time, I'm like, I don't know if I'm going to make it. I don't know if I'm going to make it out of this. And so you start, questioning certain things in life that you wish you had done, right? And one of those things, when I was dying in bed, I was like, you know what? I'm going to show these people how to be an influencer when it comes to real estate, right? So once I could finally get out of bed, and oh my gosh, I was so weak. I couldn't even go up a flight of stairs without like losing my breath and my heart rate going to 220. Like, so I was in bad shape. So immediately out of bed, I go to my employer, and they're like, dude, you're so talented. Just tell us what you're going to do. It's going to make money, right? So I'm like, I'm going to start doing real estate YouTube videos, and I'm going to train other people how to do it. So I need you to pay me for that. Right. And so they agree for a period of time. And I start becoming an influencer. It's still not knowing what I'm doing. I still have no idea what I'm doing. I just want to talk to people. Right. So I'm trying to figure things out. I'm falling. Right. I'm stumbling upon myself. But, eventually I figure it out. And I'm like, oh, wow. Okay. People are starting to watch me. Okay. I'm like, wow, this is interesting. This is different. Right. And then I'm like, wow, a lot of people are starting to watch. And I'm like, wow, even a lot more people are. So then I'm like, oh my God, right? Like this is scary. This is because I don't want the clout. When I'm done with work, I want to go home. I don't want people to know who I am. I enjoy
Right.
my family. I don't want anyone. I don't want to
Right.
talk to anyone. And I have a big heart. And so when I talk to people, I give them a little bit of my soul and my attention.
Same. Yeah.
So
It's hard.
and then I'm like, then I start realizing, like, dang, man, there's like a lot of people, and I'm looking at the comments, and like a lot of people are relying on me, and it scares me, Melody, because one thing I never, ever, ever want to do is I don't want to do the thinking for other people. I
Right.
want to give people tools to do the thinking for themselves.
Right.
And so that scares me because it feels like not all, but some people I'm doing the thinking for them. And so that I take a step back. I'm like, oh wait, I don't want that. I
Mhm.
don't want that type of control over people. And so just over the course of doing these videos, there's been multiple times where I've taken a step back. I've asked what type of message I want to give to people, how to present that message, how to get in front of people. And ultimately, at the end of the day, all what I'm trying to do is get people's attention. I want to talk about things that are going on right now, but in each of my videos, I also want to inject overwhelming value. So
Mhm.
I want you to come what you're interested in, but I want you to leave a better person, and that's tricky, right? That's tricky. It's like, as a content creator, journalist, you have to figure out how do you do all of those things? How do you keep people engaged for 40 minutes, right? I mean, this
Right.
how do you keep people engaged for 40 minutes and teach them something the entire time? That's hard, right? That's hard to do, right? So I feel like I'm in a really good place right now, though, as far as what's going on with YouTube. Obviously, I have the courses that I'm trying to do for free. Maybe one day I'll make money and do something. But right now, Melody, just through all of this research, all of my career on YouTube, it's really opened my eyes to three main things. Three things. Number one, and this is like changed my entire like concept. Number one, and this is probably the most depressing. The apathy is overwhelming.
Mm.
The apathy. I knew that there was apathy, but it's hard not to discredit how strong the apathy is. And apathy means that some people, when we educate them, they don't care, right? They hear it. And I'm a victim of that myself. I remember I lost everything. I heard it. I knew what was going on, but I still didn't change. And so that's why it
Mhm.
scares me. So the apathy caught me off guard. That's the first thing. The second thing was the manipulation um, from the elites, from the Federal Reserve, from the media. I feel like the elites now control all the media streams. I don't feel like any media station is completely unbiased. I feel like the narrative is now under control. The manipulation blows my mind. And it's not just the media. It's just like the people that are watching the media, industry professionals, they watch that. And it's all a lot of fraud, a lot of manipulation. And then they take what they learn there and then they spew it into the industry. So
Mhm.
there's this whole chain of manipulation. It's a circular manipulation thing going on. And that caught me off guard because to me, it's like, hey, when someone lies to you, it's if they did it on purpose and they could, especially they continue to do it, they're done. Stop trusting them. But people still trust the Fed. They
Yeah,
still trust,
it's wild.
and it's like, well, I'm showing you guys they're lying to you. They're revising the data, and still you're allowing them to be manipulated. And the reason why they're allowing them to manipulate it is they do not want to change because change is painful.
It's
So
hard.
those are the first two things. The third thing, and I mean, man, how evil and powerful and sticky the inflation really is. We didn't have the level of inflation that we did during the GFC. And what I mean
Yeah.
by, how sticky the inflation is and how evil it is, that's the wealth gap.
Mhm.
The inflation is legit the wealth gap. It's why the powerful and elite can thrive. And it's why the lower middle class are being destroyed. Inflation is
Indentured
an evil
servants is what
tool.
we are basically. Yeah.
Yeah. So, those are the three things that I can't stop thinking about.
Yeah, no. And you can tell, this is a purpose-driven mission for you, and you are so passionate. And, I think I wanna talk a little bit about you meeting Mitch and this story that you broke, which is huge, and it's getting out there everywhere. George Gammon picked it up. What's the larger guy? I forget the other that Mitch went on. It doesn't matter. Anyway, there are a ton of people picking up this story now, but I think it's a total testament to who you are because he contacted you and how just tell us a little bit what that story is and how it kind of unfolded.
You know, it was it was a God thing, I think, because it was it wasn't just Mitch, right? It was a combination of opportunities. It was a combination of preparation.
Mhm.
So it's very interesting. Literally, right before I met Mitch, I was kind of having an identity crisis for my channel because, again, I didn't go to school to be a YouTuber. I didn't go to school to be a journalist. This is all new for me, and I care about what I say to people, and most importantly, I care about people being better. I care about people not being hurt. I've been hurt. I've been jumped. I know about a little bit about racism. So I truly care about people. So I was going through an identity crisis and I was like, I don't want to do these videos anymore where I'm just reading an article. I'm being charismatic. I don't feel that there's value. I'm just sick and tired of it. So I was a little bit depressed and I'm like, I need something that I could talk about that's very, very helpful. It's very valuable and it gives me more purpose. And it's something that I can use to not only help people, but I can use it to enlighten people. And so I'm going through this for like 3 weeks, right? I'm super depressed. I'm like, man, and then remember at that time, the hurricane, there was mold in my house. So I got hit for like 3 weeks before that with massive bills that it just really hurt my purchasing power. So anyways, I'm like, man, I need something here. I need something of value. And of course, you and I can travel around the nation and that's very valuable, but that's way too expensive these days. I can't afford to do that anymore. So I get an email from Mitch and she sends me this breakdown in his lawsuit. And it's just like this, I'm reading this. I'm like, oh my God, this is beautiful. And he reaches out to me because someone gives him my appraisal video. I had done this appraisal video where I really try to show the viewer how bad it is on the origination side with these appraisers when it comes to USAP. And so I do this video, and then I wanted to highlight the seller concessions from the new home builders. They're supposed to be counting those seller concessions off of appraised value, but
And
they're not, which means
Yep.
the value's artificially and illegally inflated. So I do this video, no one watches it. It tanks, right? I was like, oh my God, that hurts my feelings even more, right? So I do this video.
Except for the one person that needed to see it.
Except for the one person, he sees it. He's like, all right, this guy at least understands USAP, right? He at least understands how the math works. So I read this email.
And say what USAP is. It's, if you don't mind.
Uniform Standard of Professional Appraisal Practices. It's the math. USAP is the math. It's like, how do you get value? It's the math. Like 1 + 1 = 2. That's USAP. So, I'm in bed. I'm in my bed. I just got back from a fishing trip, so my body's broken. I'm 40, so my body hurts now a lot. So I'm in bed. I'm like, oh, I can't even move right now. And I read this email from Mitch, and I'm like, man, this guy, I freaking love this. I'm like, he's helping me to understand the missing pieces of the puzzle. And anyways, so I get out of bed. I'm like, I got to call this guy right now. So I call him. We're talking for like 30 minutes. I'm like, Mitch, we got to stop talking. We got to do a video. I'm like, this is too important. And plus, I don't like scripted videos. I like raw, more genuine. I think that guidelines are important and preparation is important. But when I first met Mitch, I didn't want to prepare. I took a couple bullet points, but I wanted the viewers to understand that I was a real person, asking another real person some really important stuff. So I do that first video, and I mean, it goes pretty viral. I think we get like 260,000 views. So it does so well. So that was also rewarding because I already knew that the story was there. I already knew that Mitch had value, but for that to be matched with interest and people enjoying what they're learning, it's so rewarding.
And just so, for those that don't know about it, what did Mitch uncover?
Okay, so it's not. Go ahead. Yeah.
Go ahead. No, I was just going to say it doesn't have to be the big detailed thing.
No, it's not just what he uncovered that makes Mitch special, because I also uncovered it, right? I already knew that the central appraisal districts I'm in Houston. I already knew that the central appraisal districts were overvaluing properties to be taxed on. I already knew that. Okay. But my attention wasn't on it. My attention was on the front end appraisers following USAP. But I already knew this was happening. What Mitch was able to do was articulate it and explain to me in a way that I understood that that's the root of many of the current issues that we have in society. Once I started understanding that a lot of the fraud and unaffordability and overvaluation happens on the central appraisal district level and on the state comptroller level, my eyes were open. Because then from there, I'm like, oh, they're overvaluing my house. So just to put this for the viewers, if they don't know, there's a house about a mile from where I'm at right now that was listed for $425,000. Okay. This house can't sell. So it's listed, active listing in the market, can't sell for $425,000. The assessment, meaning the county is taxing that house, saying the house is worth this much, so we're going to collect taxes based on this amount, was $567,000, meaning
Wow.
That house was over assessed by over $120,000.
It's
So I knew
insane.
that was happening. It's freaking crazy. I knew that was happening, but I didn't articulate. Like Mitch was the guy that was able to give me those missing pieces that helped me. Like, boom, son of a gun,
And connect it
right?
to, state county budgets, state budgets, and, essentially, because I think what happened to us in 2021, everybody thought they were getting rich off of their own something special they were doing, right? Like, "Oh, we're all getting rich. It's all the
Federal
wages are
Reserve.
rising
Yeah.
again." And so we had this false sense of wealth. And I think the counties and the state and local governments did as well. They had gotten that
Yes.
350 billion
Hmm.
from the federal government, and they felt fat. They felt, "Man,
Yes.
I'm fat. I'm rich." And so then they started making a lot of decisions like they were actually rich. And they
Yep.
thought that those tax revenues were going to keep forever and everything's going to be forever. So they just kept spending. And now we are in a situation where they need those home values to be inflated, or they're going to be, as Mitch likes to say, and I won't say it, you say it, they're going to be
Bankrupt.
bankrupt. Right.
Yeah.
Sorry, I did
Um,
say it.
it's so
Yeah.
crazy. And then they base their new budgets based on their old budgets' reckless spending. And I'm going to tell you, and you really hit nail on the head there. These municipalities, these school districts, they're spending money like I was in 2007, right before I
Exactly.
lost everything, which was I
Right.
kept my head in the sand. I kept living luxuriously. And I was like, the Fed's going to help me. They're
Yeah.
spending the same way. These school districts, Melody, especially the school district, because that is the largest municipality, bigger than the police department normally, the EMTs, the school districts are ground zero for fraud. And it's
Mhm.
not just the way the comptroller and central appraisal districts appraise the homeowners, because the school districts and whoever's playing them knows that the guarantee of their debt is the taxpayer. They go
Mhm.
crazy. And I'm working on a video with a whistleblower that works for an HVAC, an AC air conditioning company. He's like, Travis, let me explain how they're spending money. And it's our money, taxpayer. They issue the
Mhm.
bonds. The bond is the debt. He's like, to put this in perspective, they're paying my company $64,000 to install an HVAC. I'm like, oh, cool. How much does it use? You give me some premise here, right? So $64,000 they're getting paid, but it should only cost the school district $8,000. Melody, this is going on,
Yeah.
from what I can tell, in every single city around the nation. And the other crazy thing is, then that leads me to something else, right? I mean, Mitch, it's hard to keep up with Mitch because he knows these things. So he's like, wait, he's like, come on,
Mhm.
Travis, catch up. Let me explain standard deviation. So, and we've had many late nights going over math, that man and I. Um, you start to realize that they've been broke this whole time. And then I asked, well, what about the pension money, right? Like, where's the money
Mhm.
that the teachers are putting into their pensions? It's gone. They don't even have
Crazy.
it's called unfunded liabilities. Their
Yeah.
pensions are unfunded. And then I asked the next question, well, where do they put the money then? They take the money from the school teachers' pensions and they invest it in things like, as an example, a solar plant,
Mhm.
through
Right.
313 agreements. But the craziest thing is these 313 agreements. So it's way worse than you think. They do that for a few. So a 313 agreement is basically the school district agreeing to lower their tax generated revenue from a solar field. So solar field is like, all right, we need a tax break, right? We'll give you some of the revenue, but we need a massive tax break. So the school gives them a massive tax break, like 90%, right? Like, and then that developer uses that 90% reduction of tax liability as qualifying income to get a loan. But it gets worse. The school does the same thing, because the school's like, well, in 10 years from now, I'm going to make this much money. Or in
Mhm.
5 years from now, I'm going to make this much money from the revenue off of the solar fields. The only problem with doing that is they're doing that and they're using that income today.
Mhm.
So they're going to the bond review board and saying, hey, you need to issue us this debt. We can pay it back because look at the money that we're getting from the tax revenue and look at the money we're getting from the actual revenue, as an example, from these solar farms. But the fact is, Melody, is they can't do that because they're not
Right.
getting that money at all. And so it is a fraud, and they're working together to just to keep it going, when the reality is there's no income whatsoever at all. Half these
Right.
solar farms aren't even up and running.
Right. And
So
I think you just take that little, that example, and it gets multiplied across the country, and it's how our entire society is working. We're spending money we don't have, period. And so we've been talking for about an hour. We're going to wrap up, but I want to do a couple of things. One, I want to talk about the fact that you and I need to get back on the road, right? We very desperately want to get to California because something is happening there in a similar way that happened in Florida and Texas. And I think it's kind of shocking because I think people always think that California is impervious. But I look to what Gavin Newsom just did when he had to balance his budget, and he took 1.1 billion from affordable housing initiatives. And so everybody that thinks the government's going to come save everyone in the housing market it doesn't understand that when their backs are against the wall, that's not going to happen. And so you and I, like you're saying, inflation has hit us both hard. We're taking care of multiple people, but we know this is important. So we started something that made both of us a little bit uncomfortable. But a GoFundMe page, and I'll place that in the show notes here for folks if you're interested in contributing. And kind of what Travis and I will do is a quarterly accounting of all those funds that we receive, because we want to be transparent, and we really hate asking for money. But at the same time, both you and I have done all these trips with our money. I mean, we didn't get money from anyone else, and these trips are very expensive, but we did it because we felt it was important to get the message out there to people. And honestly, Travis, if you hadn't gotten some of that drone footage, I don't think people would really understand. And it's a small group of people. So anyway, I just kind of wanted to plug that. But also, I want to say, Travis, I want to leave last words to you in terms of, what is the one message that you really want to get across to people out there today?
I mean, first of all, well done right there. Let me talk about the GoFundMe real quick. 100%. I don't want to ask anyone for money because that's not how I was raised. But the fact of the matter is I cannot go out and do that unless someone helps. And I don't want it to be any special, if the viewers want it, I want to show them. I love being out there. We put a ton of effort into the cinematography to show you guys what's really happening. But yeah, if you guys do want that, let us know. Again, I'm sorry, that we have to ask for help. We're just putting it out there. We still love you no matter what. Okay.
That's right.
Now, as far as the message, what I would tell the average viewer is I think it's time to redefine our lives. I think that if you're not happy, you're frustrated, I think it's time to redefine your purpose. And I think it's time we ask ourselves, what do we want in life? And I think that most people will come to the conclusion it's not a house. Okay. Right now, we do not need a house to be important people. We do not need to be kept up with the Jones. Society is telling us
Or
to
the
stay in a
Bezos.
debt.
Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah, to be slaves of debt, to live this bubble of a life. But what I want to tell you guys is that's all wrong. That's all false. What we should be doing, in my opinion, is saving our money, canceling our subscriptions, being careful how we're using our electricity. Like everything right now is on solar, by the way, because I'm watching how I'm using my electricity. And, redefine how you get what you put your attention into, right? Go help some people. And you don't have to. And the thing is, and this is a beautiful thing about helping people, it doesn't even cost money. When I lost everything, Melody, I had no money. Literally, the only thing that I could do to help people was to spend time with them,
Mhm.
right? And a lot of times, like with widows, especially, like I would go work on their house, clean their deck, whatever it is. I want people to understand, as human beings, what we're being taught on mainstream media is not how we're supposed to be living as human beings. What we're supposed to be doing. If you ask people right before they die, what did they appreciate most about life? It's generally the relationships,
Mhm.
because that's where love derives from. That's how you love other people. So I gotta say, man, love other people and stop loving yourself in a way that all you could do is love yourself. It's important to love yourself. You got to love yourself first. Okay. I know that. I've been depressed
Right.
before, but there's a step two. All right. Take step two, love yourself, and then love other people. And that's hard, Melody. And not every day do I want to love people, right? You know how hard it is to maintain that level of energy.
Well, it's a
but
commitment. It's a
it's a
commitment.
commitment. And I fail, right? I mean, I people upset me sometimes. I lash back out, but at the end of the day, I'm always trying to get back to where I need to be to love and to serve. And I think
That's
that people should remember that in life.
excellent, Travis. And this is why I love working with you, because your heart is so pure in many ways. We're human, obviously. We think horrible things that happens, but you just have such a big heart, and you have so much love inside of you, and so much energy and passion. And that is why everything you do, I think, is success. And yes, of course, we've had failures, but you keep hustling, you keep moving, and that's the most important thing I think
Hmm.
people need to understand is when you are knocked down, just don't stay there. Get up. If you can only
Yeah.
take one step, take that one step. And then tomorrow, take two steps and then three steps and go hang some gutters if you have to. I mean, do something that is outside of yourself instead of kind of focusing on what you think you should have at this point in your life. So, Travis, where can people find you?
DNN, Doomers News Network. My real estate channel is Real Estate Mindset. But I'm going to tell you, man, people don't need to find me. People need to find themselves.
That's awesome.
I'll
I
shut up.
love it.
Sorry.
No. Thank you so much, Travis. As always, it has been awesome talking to you, my buddy, my pal in doom. Guys, I'll paste that link in the show notes for the GoFundMe. Again, we would appreciate, and we don't, if you can't, you can't, but if you want to, um, you know, it would be a huge blessing to us. So thanks so much for joining. I'll see you again next time. I have an exciting guest, I think will be the next show, just talking a little bit more about student loans and the fact that actually, when they took out the right for people to discharge those in
Mm.
bankruptcy, it was really going against the Constitution. And I think that's something people don't realize. And so I've got an interesting guest from California that I'll have on here in the next couple of weeks. Looking forward to that. So thanks again, everyone. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you again next time.